confirm that, please?
There were no written comments from the public.
Great, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 7, adoption of the consent calendar. We have 3 items here: the board meetings from June 6th, the current consent for claims, and the receivables shut-off reports. Is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
Yeah, Dornbrook so moved.
Does it include the AP vouchers? Doesn't.
Yes.
Should.
So I had one question on the AP vouchers, which is that page 7, just there's a. Yeah.
Yeah, so
You need to pull it off the consent.
so that goes into number 8.
Okay.
So that would be what letter would that fall under here?
Oh, it goes into 8. So
Right.
so you would the motion to approve would be for items A and C.
Okay. A motion for approval of A and C. So,
Yeah, Dornbrook so moved.
okay,
And abstain seconds.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so let's talk about 7B and agenda item now 8. So it's current consent plans, John.
Oh, there's just one question. What are we paying Baggett bookkeeping for? This, I thought we were done with that. It's on page 12. It's a $1,650 payment to
That
Baggett.
ongoing consulting.
Is he still doing consulting work?
Yeah.
Really?
Mhm.
What does he do?
He was helping with like the budget draft that, since it's my first
Okay.
year doing budget, so he helped kind of guide me through that process.
That's all I have.
Right,
What's the amount, John?
16.
Page 12.
And 1650.
I think that's what you
Yeah.
said, John. Okay, is that the only motion to accept the AP vouchers, consent claims?
Yeah, motion to accept the AP vouchers.
For a second,
I'll second that.
all in favor, indicate with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. Let's move on to agenda item 9. So the first item here will now be the wastewater rate study. Eric.
Okay. So we have our consultant, Mark Hildebrand, who did our last wastewater rate study on the line. So I'm gonna stop sharing and then he can share his PowerPoint. And he'll take it away.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me here today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm not sure how much turnover there was since the last time I did a study. I see some familiar names, but I'll go ahead and go through this presentation. We are updating the rates for the water and wastewater, which involves looking at the financial plans and also just making sure that the rates are complying with all applicable law. So I'll take you through that process. We'll start by just doing an overview of rate studies, and then we'll jump into the water utility, then talk about the wastewater, and then wrap up with the project schedule. So just a general note.
Go ahead and hit share, Mark.
Oh, am I not sharing?
You're not sharing.
Oh, well, let me try again. Share. Oh, correct. There we go.
That's
How's
better.
that? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So just a quick note on how rate studies go. There's 3 general steps to setting rates. They're shown up here on the screen. Revenue requirements is the same as a financial plan. And that's really just looking at the big picture of money coming in and money going out in the form of expenses, operating expenses, capital expenses, debt. And then just coming up with a 10-year plan on how we expect those expenses to evolve over the next 10 years and how much revenue we're going to need in order to meet those obligations. And once we understand how much rate revenue the district needs, then you look at how your different customers drive the cost, and that's the cost of service analysis, where we look at your customers, we look at the size of their meters, the way they use water, and we allocate costs to the customers based on various metrics. And then the rate design is the final step where once we've allocated costs to different customer classes, then we make decisions on how their bill is going to look when they receive it. So jumping into the water rates, we'll start with the financial plan. And first, here's a snapshot of what revenues look like for the water utility. You can see the vast majority of the revenue comes from rates, about almost 90% from rate revenue. There are some other miscellaneous sources, operating revenues, interest earnings on your reserves. Currently, there is property tax, and this will be a topic of discussion, the property tax and how you'll be treating that going forward. Um, for this particular snapshot, we used $55,000, which is about 50% of the current allocation. And then there's also connection fees from development, which can be rather volatile in any given year. You might have substantially more, substantially less money coming from connection fees. On the other side of the coin, we have your operating budget here. So this does not include capital costs, but you can see that there's about $820,000 in operating costs that were budgeted for last fiscal year, the fiscal year that just ended a couple days ago. And you can see that broken into the various uh, categories here. Now, the big topic here for the rate increases that are going to be discussed are mostly being driven. I mean, there's inflation. There's always inflation. Usually goes to about 3% per year, give or take. Um, It's been a bit more lately. But the other big driver is going to be your capital spending. You can see from this graph that the recent average capital spending over the last 5 years has only been about $21,000 for water. And going forward, you're forecasting it to be $727,000 per year. So a really significant increase in capital spending. Um, and just to let you know what's coming in future slides, it's really hard to transition from this, the low level capital spending that you've been doing to the increase that you see here. So in order to facilitate the transition to increasing capital spending, we will be proposing some debt in order to shave some of the peak years, namely fiscal 28 and 20, fiscal 2028 and 2031 are both pretty substantial. So we will be proposing to issue some debt there.
May we ask a question of clarification, or do you want to wait, Doug?
Sure, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Do these numbers, these numbers do not seem to square with the CapEx budget that we did finalize last month. Or I'm confused. I recognize the big bar in FY 26 or 7 for the manganese, but I don't recognize the second 1.67.
Yeah, so
Bar.
it is our capital plan. Because we had the advantage of our water master plan, we have a planning horizon longer than the 5-year capital plan that was just approved. So 2031 is more than 5 years out, which is why you didn't see it before, but you
So
did see it in the water master plan.
That's 2031. That's the second big bar.
Correct.
I'll hold other questions till later. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, feel free to jump in. Very open format here. Then the last part of the financial plan that we talk about is just how much cash do we want to keep in reserves. It's important to have good reserve policies because it helps with your it both helps it helps to protect the district, and it also helps with your credit rating if and when you issue debt. And so you do have policies that exist. The operating reserve is 25% of annual operating expenses, so that comes out to about $200,000 in cash. And then the capital reserve is 25% of the cash needed of the approved 5-year capital plan. And so that would be a target of almost $1 million, $980,000. So the total target is about $1.2 million, and the current balance right now is $400,000. So you're meeting your operating reserve, the 200,000, which I consider, if you look at these, consider the operating reserve, I consider this to be a minimum reserve level. So you never want to plan to be below the $200,000. The capital reserve is more of a target where you want to get to that number over time, but it's not essential that you meet that target year in, year out. It's more the capital reserve fund is designed to be drawn down and built back up depending on the year. So The fact that you're currently at $440,000 is fine. We just want to develop a financial plan that helps you work towards that reserve target over time.
I'm sorry to be disruptive. I'll ask another question on the same vein. Because these capital reserves are a function of of a 5-year plan, and my question a moment ago, which may have seemed like silly oversight, I didn't recognize that the big second bar in the bar chart was out of our 5-year CapEx.
Yeah.
But I don't know what that what is that 1.7 million that is in fiscal 2031?
Well, I believe that's the tank recoatings.
It's tank recoatings, because that bar does come into the no.
So I'm going off memory here, but 2030 is the first tank recoating. 2031 is one of the well building hardenings and one of the tank coatings. That's from the master plan.
Okay. And when we calculate our target reserves on the capital side, that's 25% of roughly 4 million that would not include what comes in 2031. Am I correct?
The way our goals are, the targets are calculated, it's 25% of 10 years anticipated capital. That's good.
5 out of that. Okay.
So I don't know if you can still see my screen, the Excel file.
It's a little tiny, yeah, but
A little small, yeah. So on 2031, the big one is the well 2 instrumentation upgrade is $1 million.
Okay.
The second is a $400,000 well instrumentation upgrade for well 4 and 5.
Okay.
Those
Well,
are the-
I'm sorry if this is a bit in the weeds, but it looked, according to the slide, the capital target is 25% of 5-year, not 10-year CapEx. And that hardening stuff in FY31 would not be in the calculation. It seems to me, but
Correct. So it'd be 25% of the first 5 years of the green bars
Right.
here,
about 4
which
million.
comes out to, and you know, it's a rolling average, so that target's going to change over time depending on whatever it happens to be in the next 5 years. So it's not a hard number.
Maybe you could explain, where's the 25% come from? Why is it 25%?
that's the policy adopted by the district. We had to adopt one. Well, we were supposed to have adopted it over a decade ago, but we didn't have one. And when I got here, we added one. It's an overall goal. We didn't meet it in the last rate study. But overall, across all of our utility funds, we do meet it. You take them as an aggregate. So you might have do back to a slide presentation instead of the way the view. There you go. So yeah, so that's what.
So if you look across all the utilities, we're beating our reserves, but we're under, we historically have been under in water, wastewater. It would take us a substantial rate hike to close the gap on that. It doesn't seem like a good idea.
And we're not allowed to borrow from one to help the other, are we? We can't take.
You can borrow across the utility funds, only the utility funds.
Okay.
And we try not to. And what'll smooth this out is debt.
Yeah.
Spike. So rather than going negative in our reserve, we'll take on some debt.
Yeah, it's like 6 or 7 million. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, thank you.
Sure. This slide covers, let me just make a note here, rolling 5-year. This note just covers some of the financial assumptions. We did assume that costs would inflate at about a rate of 3.5%, which is just a little bit over long-term historical has been 3%. I think this is a bit optimistic, 3.5%. We've seen numbers significantly higher than that in the recent years. But it is a 10-year forecast, so over time, 3.5 might be pretty close. We are assuming 1.12% interest earnings on your reserves, and that you will grow at a rate of about an average of 7 new residential accounts per year. And then for the debt, we've assumed a 5% interest rate, a repayment period of 20 years, and a cost of issuance of 1%.
For the interest earnings, I feel like that's a little lower than I would have thought from some of the, like our 5-star.
So it's lower than what we've seen recently,
Yeah.
but that goes also to the call the CPI has been higher than what we've seen recently, so they're going hand in glove, but this is accruing across a 10-year average. As you'll remember when you're getting, you know, 0.25%, we're happy about it.
Right, we've made some significantly improved changes and that does not average out well over 10 years, I would say.
Well, let me put it in terms of how insignificant this is, so we
Okay.
stop arguing about it.
Fantastic.
We have about 400,000 in reserves, and if we earn 1%, we're talking about $4,000.
So let's talk about more.
Yeah, let's talk about more.
Good, thanks.
So here's that capital spending forecast again, shown a little bit differently here. The black represents the portions that we propose to debt finance. So it's a pretty substantial part of your capital spending that we're proposing to debt finance. This is going to allow you to adopt rates that are smooth over time. If we try to cash finance too much capital too quickly, then we'll have to spike rates a lot sooner in order to get the cash flow started. So this amount of debt is being proposed in order to keep your rates smoothed out over time. So it's 4 different debt issues, as you can see listed on the right side.
Can I just point out, and I think we all know this, but for the record, I mean, this is all being driven, at least in the 5-year timeframe, by manganese, the manganese issue. And we have later on the agenda, the attempt at a waiver. I mean, as we're discussing and thinking about all this, would it be helpful? It'd be helpful to me to know, can we assess any kind of probability that we will be successful at getting a manganese waiver, which would virtually eliminate most of our CapEx and need for debt financing?
So let me correct something. It will not eliminate the need for most of the debt. It's only 1.6 of all the $6 million you see here. So it's almost, it's a quarter, but it's not most. And no, we can't, no waivers ever been granted in California, and no one has ever applied to date. So we don't know what our chance of success is. The first hurdle is getting over the survey. I know we're going to talk about this later.
Yeah,
But
so no one's ever tried, and so we have no idea what the chances are.
Correct. And we have to get 50% of the people to respond. What I will say though is, and I said this at finance, I know you remember this, but for the benefit of the others, if we do get the waiver, come next July 1st, the board could go less of a rate increase than is authorized by the study. You can never go more, but you can always go less. So we would, if that did happen, we would have the opportunity to, 1, not issue debt, and 2, reduce the rate increase based on the potential success of that. But we won't know that for quite some time.
And then I'll also just ask a more general question. I think it requires just some explanation at a high level. How is it that water, our capital spending over the last 5 years has been virtually nothing, I mean, $21,000 a year. And now the new normal, even excluding manganese one-offs, is very different. It's just, I assume, I think I know that the answer is now we're going to do long delayed maintenance and repair, like addressing tanks and distribution pipes. But what's the high level answer to that?
So the tanks are not delayed. We had them inspected as part of the master plan.
That's the wrong word, maybe, excuse me.
Yeah, definitely. But we need to recoat them, just remain and repair some girders to maintain compliance with our drinking water permit. The well buildings, those have been deferred. We've been talking about those since Caldor hardening those buildings. We didn't have the rates in place in the old rate study to do that. Therefore, we need to get those projects done, and we're doing a rate study so we can capture that and have sufficient cash or debt issuance to do those projects. But the big projects are both tank recoatings, manganese, and all the well upgrade, basically the well upgrades recommended by the master plan.
Thank you.
Okay, let's keep going.
Great. So this graph takes everything that we've just discussed and puts it all into one place. So the top graph here, let me get my pointer out. Okay, so the top graph is comparing forecasted revenues against forecasted expenses. So the background Mostly green is your revenue. So the black at the bottom represents non-rate revenue, sort of miscellaneous revenue. The light green in the middle represents your existing revenue from existing rates, and the dark green represents the additional rate revenue that you'll get from the proposed rate increases. And you can see the proposed rate increases down here in yellow, 12% per year increases over the next 5 years. One thing that's really important to note that this particular scenario assumes that you'll continue to allocate $101,000 in property tax per year. We'll cover two more scenarios with other property tax allocations here in a moment. So back to this graph, the foreground columns represent your expenses. So the dark blue represents your operating expense, which you can see increasing at that inflationary rate I mentioned. The hashed blue is your debt service, which currently you don't have any debt service, but you can see it increasing every time we issue new debt. And you can see each one of those debt issues down here at the bottom row, the net debt proceeds. Every time we issue debt here, the debt service increases. And then the light blue is that cash funded capital. So you can see there's not very much cash funded capital in the first few years because we're mostly debt financing. And then starting in 2031, you'll see more cash funded capital. The middle graph here represents your target or your forecasted reserve levels. So that black line is the minimum reserves I mentioned. That's your operating reserve. The dashed line is the minimum reserve plus that capital reserve, which adds up to about $1.2 million total. And you can see the red line is working to get to that target over time. And you can see it gets to that target, but then we start cash financing more in 2031, and so it starts dipping back down and then starts to recover again. Your debt coverage ratio is the last piece of information on here, which is a measure of how easily you can afford your debt. The minimum level would be 1.2, but the desired level would be 1.5, and you can see that we always stay at least at 1.5 or above, so that's good news. That's what this graph represents. This is a lot of information, so before I go to the next two scenarios, any questions about what this graph is showing? Okay, so scenario two is what would the rates need to look like if we drop the property tax allocation down to $55,000, so half. And you can see it goes from 12% to 13% over the next 5 years. And then scenario three is with zero property tax allocation, and similar to the last one, it goes up by 1% per year for the next 5 years, so 14% per year for 5 years.
Eric, can you remind us why we would want to lower the property tax allocations? It has to do with,
So the property tax
Fire.
would be available for other things, particularly fire. That would reduce the 218 assessment ask.
I mean, historically, water is an enterprise fund, and you want what enterprise funds to pay for themselves. You've never been able to do that with wastewater. But it's considered the responsible way to go is dedicate property taxes for like fire and things like
yeah,
that.
no disagreement, just wanted to remind us.
And it's just a change in situation too. When the property tax was assigned to utilities, there wasn't a real need for it for fire. Now that situation's changed, so the more common use of property taxes,
Yeah.
fire department, emergency medical skills. So
I mean,
this
it's
is
an
a
ideal
migration.
situation.
Yeah, so this is a
reach.
exactly. So this is a philosophy change or movement in that direction, if we do this.
Eric, how many guests do we have on Zoom? Is it a large number?
Six.
Six, thank you.
They're right there. The people on the side.
Okay.
Before I move on to the next slide, I do want to make one other point. The question was raised earlier about, or the topic of, this reserve target perhaps being more than what you need and whether it's driving the rate increases. I do want to point out that, for example, in 2029, your debt coverage ratio was 1.5, and I mentioned that we don't want to go below 1.50. So really what's driving the first 4 years of rate increases, all these 14%, is just as much the debt coverage ratio as it is your reserve target. So it is, you know, if you even if you reserved your if even if you lowered this reserve target, you'd still have these practically the same rate increases, at least for the first 5 years would be very similar.
The only thing I would add, or John, maybe you want to add what finance committee's recommendation was on this?
Yeah, our recommendation was to use the model with the zero dollars of property tax. And because the percentage difference in the rate increases is fairly small. Most of the rate increases, like we said, is based on capital requirements and maintaining our debt ratio.
Should we do wastewater as well and then come back? I think there are a couple more slides for water, but do we want to go?
Yeah, Mark, how would you like them to handle it? Would you like them to take water as a whole and do their voting on that, or and then do the wastewater, or what's best? For
Yeah, let's this I'll go ahead and finish the water and then
Yeah, we got 4 more slides, I think, or 5 more slides on water. So
yeah, so we'll switch gears here and talk about the cost of service and rate design. So just as a reminder of your existing rate design, you have a fixed base charge where you get 70% of your rate revenue. It's based on dwelling units for residential and an EDU value that's assigned to commercial based on their past water usage and assigned to them relative to average residential water usage. Um, Irrigation meters pay a rate that's prorated due to the fact that those meters are only active for 4 months of the year, and each irrigation meter is assigned one EDU. The fixed meter charge is a flat charge per meter, which is 6% of your revenue, and then you have your usage rates, which is about a quarter of your revenue, and that's your variable revenue. So in terms of what we're proposing to change or not change, we have three different topics here. The first is the methodology for calculating the irrigation EDU. As I mentioned, all residential accounts are assigned one EDU for the base rate, and commercial EDUs are calculated based on dividing their historical water usage by average residential usage. So that's how you come up with a number of EDUs, and each commercial is assigned a minimum of at least one EDU. Currently, irrigation is charged just one EDU per meter, regardless of how much water they use. And in comparing that to what I've seen in other utilities and what's common in the industry, it would be best practice to treat them the same as commercial. So if you have irrigation customers that are using substantially more, they should be charged a higher EDU value. So there's only actually 6 accounts that would be affected. In other words, most of your irrigation accounts either use as much as an average residential customer or less, and so they would just continue to get one EDU per meter. There are 6 accounts that use more than one EDU, and a few of them are substantially more. And so we would recommend adjusting their EDU assignment based on that water usage.
I just want to clarify, the change is only residential because commercial does see the EDU calculation.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Commercial's already, yeah. that's
residential
right.
irrigation, correct?
Right,
Correct. Yeah. Good point. I'll make that edit.
okay. And we have 3 commercial irrigation.
Correct.
Then the second topic here is that the board had previously asked about what would happen if we made EDUs semi-variable for all customers. So in other words, if you applied the same concept to residential accounts where their EDU assignment would be based on historical average or historical water usage as well, rather than just having a flat one EDU per residence. That would be pretty unique. I actually have never seen that done before. I can't say it would be indefensible, but it would be very uncommon. It would take a fair amount of administrative work because now you have an EDU value that's changing pretty significantly every year. And it just becomes much more dynamic in terms of the data that's required to track it. And then it would introduce a lot of bill volatility to customers who aren't used to seeing that part of their bill change. And could be generate a lot of questions. So I don't think it would, I don't really see much of a benefit to doing it. And I do see a lot of potential headaches associated with it. So I would recommend against this, but it certainly isn't impossible to do, and um, be willing to look at it further if there's more interest in that.
When we say EDU variability, I heard you say once a year. Is that the assumption we would change no more frequently than once a year if we did it at all? Is that
Correct.
correct?
It would be once a year, and I assume it would be some sort of rolling average of the last 5 years of usage.
I'm sorry to get out of the water, but when we do EDU for electric, that does change every year, doesn't it? Or does EDU not change?
AMU changes.
AMU changes and doesn't.
Unless you've been there for 3 years, then it's set.
So your base rate changes year to year in electric because your
For
AMU
for your
changes.
first 3 years.
Correct.
Then
For your first 3 years, it does,
The equivalent
and then
here,
it's fixed.
and the equivalent here would be something like we would set the rates to say for the next 3 years, everyone in Kirkwood gets a variable EDU or what, I guess one EDU, and we measured everyone for some number of years. And then we say, if you're 1.1 or 1.6 or 1, then that's your permanent EDU. That would be the equivalent here from an electric perspective.
Okay, so but the precedent that our customers know in electric is that once your base rate is established, AMU, EDU, then it doesn't change after, I think, 3 years. And so that's what people are accustomed to
well, not water now.
in electric though. Okay, thank you.
That's interesting. So whatever they happen to do over that 3 years gets locked in forever
For the
Until the next rate study.
until the next rate study. Got it. Okay.
I don't think we want to evaluate the electric rate study right now.
It's
I
just,
didn't want to, I apologize for getting out of the water, but this,
yeah, no, I'm glad you brought it up. And it's what we did in electric, much like water, was never done before. We're the only one that does this. The other thing I would say is every time either a new customer comes in and starts all over, or someone's in the midst of their 3-year calculations, the amount of time staff has to spend relearning what it is and explaining it, and then explaining it the second time, and then the third time, because customers don't get it, is an astonishing amount of our admin workload. And staff would strongly recommend we don't do this for that reason alone.
I don't disagree. On average, we do a rate study, whether it's electric or water, every 5 years. So,
Correct.
you're not locked in forever.
Correct.
Thank you.
Sure. And then the last topic here is the hot water meters. There's 27 meters that measure specifically hot water usage. And during the last rate study, we thought that they were behind the master meter, and so we only charged them the meter charge, which is that smaller of the two. The fixed meter charge, which is only 6% of your revenue. But in fact, they are standalone meters, and so we propose to charge them the full base charge going forward.
Are those all in like commercial customers and a large HOA boilers?
It's one HOA.
It's all one HOA. Oh,
Correct.
thank you.
I mean,
Okay.
Mark summarized the history really briefly, but that's a short summary.
That's
We
fine.
thought it was behind a master meter. It was not. We own, operate, maintain those meters, therefore base rate needs to be applied once we found out the true plumbing was different than what was historically believed.
So we reviewed all this in finance and I think items 1 and 3 are fairness issues. Like 3 is actually just a historical mistake, right? Or
Correct.
oversight.
Correct.
And number 2, we just discussed that the variable EDUs doesn't seem like it would be a benefit. So I guess we recommended these 3 items.
Yeah, finance concurred with all of Mark's recommendations.
Okay. This slide gets into the weeds in terms of how we do the cost of service allocation. You can see that we have different line items for expenses, and we allocate them to either the meter charge, the base charge, or the usage charge. There's a fair amount of discretion that goes into how you allocate these costs, and there's no one right way to do it. But this particular methodology is pretty consistent with what was done back in 2021 during the last rate study. And you can see that the results in terms of the percent allocation of cost to each one is pretty similar to what you had. We're looking at the percentages at the bottom here. We are proposing that a bit more get recovered through the usage rate, but nothing that would be financially significant to the district. This table again is in the weeds, but it goes through the math on how we end up with unit charges. So each one of these, the meter charge is based on the number of meters, and so we allocate the total revenue requirement to 1,700 meters until we get about $3 per meter per month. And then we have EDUs are the metrics for base charges, and you can see how those get calculated and turned into dollars per EDU per month. And then the usage rate is the total water usage divided by those costs, and it gives you $1 per HCF, 100 cubic feet. So just sort of takes you through that math. And it yields this rate schedule that we have here, which is the third scenario with the 14% rate increases. And it just shows you what the rate schedule will look like over the next 5 years with that particular financial plan and the proposed rate structure. This last graph here, table rather, is a little bit more useful than the rate schedule because it shows you exactly how people's bills will look going forward. So it's a bill impact analysis. So for example, it takes a residential customer with low water usage. They have a 1 EDU assignment, say they use 1 HCF per month. Their current bill would be $56.86. The proposed bill for year one would be $59.53. So that's about a $2.67 increase or a 4.5% increase. And you can see that the change in year one is, overall would be 14% for each customer, but the way that the customers will be affected will vary quite significantly depending on what type of customer you are. So the hot water meters are obviously going to see a significant increase in their bill because they previously weren't paying that base charge. So that's going to have a result in a higher percentage for them and a lower percentage for everyone else since it's a zero-sum game. The other customers that are going to see a significantly higher increase will be irrigation customers will see a larger rate increase.
I'm sorry, could you
because
explain, sorry to interrupt, could you explain why we're essentially saying we're doing a 14% rate increase, but this shows something significantly less for the vast majority of residential and commercial customers? Just
because
one tripped me up.
Right. It's because this is just applies to year one. In years 2, 3, 4, and 5, everyone will see exactly a 14% rate increase. But in year one, because there's a change to the rate design and
Oh,
the way that costs are being allocated to customers, it is going to vary. And it's mostly being driven by the fact that there's some irrigation customers that were only paying 1 EDU before, but they should be paying significantly more because they are large irrigation users. So if they'll receive a higher EDU allocation, and so their base charge is going to go up significantly. And you can see they're big customers, and their bill is going to go up significantly. And as well as there's those 27 hot water meters that are going to jump. So the fact that these customers and others will pay more than the 14% results in everybody else paying less because the average across all customers will be 14%.
I know we don't talk about customer names, but irrigation at Kirkwood is done by large commercial customers. It's not residential, or is it?
These are these are what are considered residential irrigation, but I will also note that residential irrigation includes the Girl Scout camp because they're only open 4 months out of the year. So we treated them like a irrigation, but they use a substantive amount of water there, for example.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. So that covers water. Did you want to pause and vote on water before I went into wastewater?
Yeah, let's do water first. And just a quick question on the commercial. So, I mean, A, irrigation would assume that they continue to use this at these much higher rates, right? And that's, you know,
Yeah, good point.
like, you know, if you're increasing it from, you know, doubling or in some ways the rates, I mean, that's, maybe they won't use as much water first of all, so I don't know if that matters in terms of calculation, but is the EDU for commercial, is it a rolling average? So if they change their
Are you
EDU.
talking about their
It's got-
their irrigation? Which are you
Talking
asking?
about
about?
irrigation for, if we were to accept that first recommendation and then got converted to a commercial status, is that a rolling EDU calculation
Yes.
every year over
Yes,
multiple years? So if they change their status, this isn't necessarily what they would see over time. It would be
correct.
communicate to them, this is
Commercial irrigation's already calculated at
residential for the 6 customers.
residential for the 6 customers.
I'm saying that we would potentially say to them, hey, this is the
We
new
would
rate
calculate the
structure.
same way we do commercial irrigation, which is rolling average of what an EDU is and rolling average of their usage.
Right.
And it's over the same time frame.
And is it like 3 or 5?
I think is it 3, Bob? Or is it 5? Or
3.
3.
It's the last 3 years average.
I guess my point of all this is saying that like if there was a 127.8% increase, they could change their usage and their EDU would change. And
Yeah. And I want to be clear, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong here, but out of the 6, 4 of them are going to be less than 2 EDUs and 2 will be significantly larger than 2 EDUs.
That's right. Yeah, there were 2 that
They're
really
both
stood
at
out.
1.1, 1.5,
Okay.
and then 2 will be large. And rightly so. Like, as John said, it's an equity thing, so
Sure, absolutely.
treat everybody the same.
Understood.
But yeah, the point is correct that they might receive a price signal that will result in them using less water. That will affect the district, but it will be sort of softened by the fact that it's a rolling average. So it would take 3 years before the effect of that would be fully felt by the district. And you know, you do have those reserves to protect you in case it's a significant reaction. But I don't think it would be a fine.
Right.
I don't think it'd be a big enough deal that it would affect your bottom line.
The case here is you could say they've been undercharged for many, many years.
100%. I'm just saying that we're not
And
clawbacking
they
money at
could
this
reduce.
point.
Yeah.
There's
They can stop
90
using water.
I'm just saying that of the budget, this is a small, I'm just saying for those 2 customers, they might can't count.
Irrigation makes up such a de minimis amount of our overall water budget.
That's what I'm saying. It's like grand scheme of
In the
things,
grand scheme of things, you're absolutely right.
and I'm just mean like for these 2 customers, it sounds like they might have some questions, but as John said, we have a good explanation.
But there's 90 customers that use 0.
Right.
All they have to do is ask to be disconnected. That'd save a lot of money.
Right, and that would
I
be
think-
best for that next.
And they can still do that. They can still do that. I thought they were, I thought it was terminated.
No, anyone can terminate irrigation. What we did, I know what you're remembering, Peter. What we did was we gave people a chance at the last rate study to disconnect. And if they changed their mind within 2 years to reconnect without having to pay connection fees again. That was the thing that had a term and a date. Now, we have someone now who's disconnecting from irrigation. We just are pulling the meter next week. So people can still disconnect, but you're remembering
And they
that
can
weird thing we did.
And they can connect though.
And pay connection fees, correct.
We have no like moratorium on irrigation. It's not like.
That is correct.
Right. I think that's kind of,
Yeah.
no moratorium on irrigation, like maybe propane or something.
I'm just so surprised that irrigation, which I always considered to be fairly trivial, I didn't look at it very hard. But it's apparently big enough, that plus this one HOA with the historic problem, hot water, is enough to swing us from a 14% increase to just I don't know, was it 5 or 6% in year 1? So I guess it does move the needle pretty hard. In a fortunate way. All right.
Yeah.
Doug,
Yeah, let's move to the community. Does the community have any questions? Up to a couple minutes here. Any feedback questions, but I don't see anyone coming up to the podium. I don't see hands online.
No.
Okay. All right, is there any other board discussion or questions or comments? I think the big things that we have to approve, I guess it's the rate, but I mean, the 3 main items are the slide that was on slide.
Can you go back to that slide, Mark, real quick?
15 of your presentation.
Which one? 15?
Page
15 of your presentation. There you go. But these.
And the property
conclusions-
tax is the 4th thing.
Yes, so basically the rates as proposed on slide,
Right, the 14%.
14% allocation with these changes being made is the kind of the finance recommendation, I would say. Is that right, John?
Yeah, so the finance recommendation on the motion would be to approve the rate study, the 14% increase, including rate structure discussions, items 1 and 3, and the $0 property tax allocation.
And then I'll just, Chris alluded to this, but I'll just say again, from a timeline perspective, maybe Eric, you just clarify for me, is that if we approve this today, we will be authorizing a 14% increase for this.
We would be noticing a 14%.
Sorry, you're right, sorry.
And then have a public
It's
hearing.
a public hearing, it will become effective.
Correct.
But in that time, we will potentially learn about manganese and we will learn about fire departments and some side of things. So we will.
We'll definitely, I would not say we will find out about manganese.
Okay.
100% dispute that.
Okay.
Are we gonna vote now on water only or?
Yes.
Water only.
Water on it, yeah.
And so I guess my whole point of this is saying that we would be authorizing a rate study to go out to, we'll send out the community, we'll have a hearing in September, if I remember the
If
timeline.
I remember, yeah, if I remember the timeline right, and then they would go into effect October 1st.
October
The
1st.
public hearing would be at the regularly scheduled board meeting on September 5th.
Yeah, before that or something, right, 1 p.m.
Yeah, we would do it earlier than that.
Right, and then, and so then at that point, we will. Okay, let's say this, by the next time that we set rates next year. We would have more information, at which point we could authorize this
Yes.
rate plan for 5 years. For,
No, we're gonna,
sorry,
no,
I'm saying authorize, but
No.
we're saying that's what it.
no. You will vote at the public hearing
Right.
based on the protests received. If insufficient protests are received, the board will then vote to either implement or not implement the rates if insufficient protests are received. If sufficient protests are received, then there's a whole nother process we go through. That will be at the September 5th board meeting. The rates will be set and will go into effect October 1st. The next time the rates change is July 1st of 26. And the board could say at that time, we're going to not go for the full 14 because we got the manganese waiver.
Well, or just if there's a material difference in our cost, we could come in lower than.
Yes, of
It's not just-
anything.
it's not-
It's not just
Not
manganese.
interesting,
You're
but
absolutely
My point
correct.
is that we have 2 known things that are gonna be happening in this fiscal year that we'll learn is property taxes related to fire and then also the manganese waiver. My point is that the mechanism that you just described will go into effect potentially October 1st. And then if we find that we have the ability to change our rates, that rate would be effective from potentially October 1st through June 30th,
Correct,
in which point we would then be able to reevaluate this at that time.
correct.
That was my point. Thank you for clarifying the actual wording. Do that, but
Reevaluate down.
correct.
Yeah.
Not reevaluate up, we would reevaluate down. And so by having this plan as such, it gives us the coverage that if both of those things were to pass in one way, we can still have water that is
Correct.
effective and funded and to do the things we must do.
Right.
And that's the thing I want to make sure everyone's understanding is that we cannot revise up
Correct.
over the 5 years, we can only revise down. And therefore, by making this set it this way, it gives us that chance to know what we're doing.
And to be perfectly 100% correct, just so no one calls you out of this. We could revise up with another 218 rate study.
Sure, thank you. Of course,
If something catastrophic happened,
yeah, for sure, thank you. That's a help, that's a good clarification. We're not literally legally bound to only do this every 5 years. We can do this
Correct.
whenever we want it to, if we want to keep doing, but
I would
yes.
strongly encourage against that, but yes.
Seriously,
Much fun as it
as
is.
much fun as it is to do all these every 6 months.
So, yeah,
Okay, so all that said in the background, and a lot of that background also will apply to wastewater as well.
We'll have the same conversation.
yeah.
Right, I'm saying the general context of what I just laid out is true for wastewater, but let's talk about water and make sure people are on board for 4 items.
Did this study take into account possibility of drilling a new well, or is that
That is not in the water master plan. So no.
just for clarification?
Yep, no, good point.
Well, yes, since we're about to vote on a rate increase, I just want to say that a 14% rate increase, to state the obvious, that's a big increase. And I like to try to put it in the context of the total utility bill. We have a helpful scenario for how the water, your water payment, your charge may increase next year if you're large or medium user, and we'll do the same with wastewater in just a moment. But with 14% water increase, that will hurt, and a 14% increase on wastewater, that will hurt. But it's worth remembering, correct me if I'm wrong here, but Our other two large, propane and electric, we don't have that same pressure so that the overall bill, it's not as if all our the total utility bill is looking at I hope not a double digit rate increase. It's hard to know, but if propane is around 3 or 4, I think 4% we approved. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And electric does not have a big CapEx plan, so there's not a lot of there shouldn't be a lot of pressure later in the year when we talk electric rates. I like to think that 14% has to be seen in a context of a less than 10% total bill increase. Do you agree that, is that directionally correct? Because we need to at least be mindful of the fact that 14 is a big number. Any comments?
Yeah, I think I'm very mindful that asking our customers to pay more for anything is important, that we take that into consideration. But yeah, I want to fund things that keep our permitting in place, keep us going. So yeah,
The option is to not be able to supply water.
right. That's so at that level.
That's our other choice. And these are all mandatory things that have to be done in order to be able to supply safe drinking water.
Good.
What? I thought he did the motion.
Motion, yeah.
Can I just request the clerk to actually have the actual motion include the details?
Okay, go back to that slide now. Motion to approve the rate study with a $0 allocation of property tax, including discussion items 1 and 2.
1 and 3.
1 and 3, correct,
Which
which is the
1 and 3.
Structural change to hot water meters and structural change to irrigation,
Irrigation.
residential irrigation.
okay, thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Wastewater.
Okay, wastewater. So format of these slides will be very similar, so I won't spend as much time explaining what we're looking at. On this case, the revenue that was budgeted last year for wastewater was about 90% rate revenue as well, with property tax being about 6.5%. On the operating side, it's about $1.6 million total operating costs. There is the asterisk down here is that there is a USDA loan of $7 million for the wastewater treatment project. It didn't show up in 24-25, but it will begin in 25-26 at about $260,000 per year. This is the
payments deferred in terms of were they on the P&L?
It's a work in progress account. That's
Yeah,
why you're
okay.
not seeing it.
Yeah.
So we have been paying about 25 to 30 in interest to CoBank, but that's a short-term loan. So we captured it once the project closes out, comes out of work in progress, is capitalized, starts depreciating, and we'll start paying the USDA interest, which is what is reflected at about $260 a year.
Yeah.
On the capital side, the recent average spending was 1.5 million and forecasted going forward is 1 million. I believe a lot of that $1.5 million was from the USDA funded by the USDA loan, Eric.
That is correct, yes.
Yeah. So it wasn't that red was not cash funded, it was debt funded, and the capital on the wastewater side that we're looking at, the $1 million would be proposed to be cash funded. For the reserves, we have similar reserves. Yes.
We're not saying that the debt service is in those green bars in the out years.
No, this is capital spending.
Right.
It's a
So
different line.
again, like I asked last time, I can't see on this chart, of course, earlier than 21. So we can't look back in too many years in history, but it used to be that we invested in CapEx almost nothing in wastewater. Then we did a $7 million retrofit. And now the new normal is almost $1 million a year of CapEx. So could I just ask, without not going into too much detail, why are we going from what appears to be almost nothing in CapEx to 1 million every year for the rest of time?
The system is old. It's 40 to 50 years old, depending on what we're looking at. It's either reached and is the end of its useful life or is nearing the end of its useful life.
When you say system now, because we fixed the treatment plant, but you're talking distribution mostly.
I'm talking the
Or
entirety of the wastewater
Collection,
system,
yeah.
everything, disposal, collection, and treatment. We will have to replace membranes in 9 to 11 years. We got by with 12 this last time, Peter.
Yeah,
And so, that's a, $500,000 nut right there.
Ignoring fiscal year 2021, it hasn't been low either in prior years. It's been quite a bit.
Well, 21 and 22.
Well, yeah, but ignoring that, I mean,
So
it's
that's,
quite a bit.
I apologize because I can't see before that. Okay, thank you.
In terms of the reserves, similar policies for the operating reserve, 25% of annual operating expenses, about $400,000 for that reserve, and then capital reserve, similar policy. So the target would be $1.1 million. In addition, there is a debt service reserve fund, which is based on your existing debt covenants. And so you have to hold another $260,000 in that reserve. So the total target is 1.7 and your current balance is almost $1 million. So you clearly have enough for your minimum reserve, which would be operating reserve, and your debt service. And we will work towards meeting that target over the 10 years, just like with water. Here's the graph for wastewater. Again, we have three scenarios. This first one is the full historical allocation of $250,000. And so you can see the reserves are building immediately. We are looking at 9% per year for 4 years and then 8%, and then it would dial back to 2% thereafter. So really it's a matter of ramping up to this new cash funded capital spending, new normal. And then once that's achieved, you can dial back the rate increases to basically just inflationary numbers. For scenario two, we'd be looking at 11% per year for 4 years, and then 6% in year 5. And then finally in scenario three, with no property tax allocation, it'd be 13% per year for 4 years and then 3%. I'll go ahead and pause here before I go to the rate design.
In finance committee again, as with water.
Yeah, given the percentage difference in the increases, feel that it would be best to go with the $0 property tax allocation. There aren't any other study issues to.
There's no structural changes and no debt service on this one.
Correct.
And the project's coming in under budget.
That is true.
So I'll go ahead and cover it. Since there's no complications, I'll go ahead and cover those really quick because they're just a reminder of how it's done. The existing rates is based on the fixed charge based on EDU assignment, which is 60% of your rate revenue, and then the usage charge, which depends on whether you're standard strength or high strength, and that's 40%. And these tables go through the math that was done in order to allocate costs. So we looked at both number of EDUs, annual water usage, and expected strength, both in terms of biochemical oxygen demand and suspended solids, which is a measure of sewage strength. And we allocated all these factors towards either residential, commercial, or commercial high strength. Similar table here separates cost between the base charge and the usage charge. And we have a very similar percentage in the bottom right percent in terms of how much we're recovering from your fixed versus your variable. And again, more math here showing how the allocated costs are turned into unit costs per EDU or per HCF or per pound of strength of BODSS strength. And then finally, the proposed rates. And this is with scenario 3, the 0% property tax, 13% per year, then 3%.
Can I go back and ask about the base versus variable on expense line item by item? It probably doesn't sway things a great deal, but there are a number of things that seem to be fixed no matter what, like debt, capital spending, even administration, like where we go 70-30 or 80-20. I'm not clear why that's not all 100% fixed. Even electrical utility spending, I mean, even if we had zero volume, zero usage, we still need to keep the lights on or the sewer working. So it does feel like one ought to push more into base.
Mhm.
How do you think about
You're
that?
absolutely right, and this is a big topic in both water and wastewater utilities. That's been a historical practice to charge a lot more through your variable rates than actually matches to your variable costs. There's always been a disconnect in the utility industry between those things. And if we were to allocate exactly fixed cost to fixed revenue, as you go through these, I mean, there's very, very few things that are actually variables. As I look at it, just on the surface, it's really just electricity. And if we dug it out, chemicals. So line 7 and line 13 would really be the only ones that are truly variable based on how much water or wastewater is getting treated. Um, the reason historically has been because, I mean, there's been a number of reasons why historically utilities have charged a lot more through the variable rates, but there has been a significant change I'd say over the last 5 years where the normal, I'll talk about water because that's easier one to talk about. The historical normal has been 30% fixed, 70% variable. And now I'd say it's closer to 50-50. And I have one client who's actually gone to about 85% fixed, 15% variable. Um, so in terms of actual cost of service, you're absolutely right. That's the way you would do it. The reason that folks don't do it that way is because of affordability is one reason. You make it really hard for folks to be able to control their bill or to lower their bill through usage, and then conservation. Neither of those reasons are legal reasons that you have to abide by. Um, so you certainly could go there. It just hasn't been very popular in the industry to want to go there.
And we don't feel unduly exposed by volatility of use.
Right. That's the big thing.
Could you explain that? We don't feel exposed by volatility?
There's not a high probability that lack of water or wastewater usage would cause us to not generate enough revenue.
So if you were to go to the model that we talked about, 100% fixed revenue cost go to fixed revenue, that the benefit of that is the volatility topic where if usage changes, then you don't experience any kind of financial downside at all. Whereas when you recover too much fixed revenue, you're really exposed to that risk. And the recent droughts have been one of the significant reasons why instead of being 70-30, it's now 50-50 because utilities have gotten away, did get punched in the nose during those droughts and did see financial shortfalls because they were relying too much on variable revenue. And so that's one of the main reasons that it's gone to 50-50. But at these percentages with 60% fixed, 40% variable, I'd say that you have very little exposure there. You have a little bit of exposure, but you're not wastewater doesn't typically see significant volatility. Lots of the water use volatility comes in the form of irrigation, which doesn't affect wastewater. So that's why it's not as much of a topic for wastewater.
Board is comfortable with 60-40 or even 58-45. We're comfortable with 60-40.
We're comfortable, finance committee was
70-30.
with 70-30, which is what most of the study is.
70-30, but it blends back to 50. That would we're taking.
Yeah, 58-42 is the cumulative.
The cumulative blend to the end is 60-40 essentially.
Usage over 5 years.
I mean, I think it's an important point though, Chris, in that obviously for electric, our last rate study, we swung very hard towards having our fixed costs covered by the fixed rates, because we used to have 3 or 4x usage rate than we do today.
Well,
To that.
but the reason we're at 80%, and the reason for that is we have loan covenants that we have to meet. Whereas in the water and wastewater, the loan covenants haven't been, there are more milder or haven't been.
They don't have tier or O-tier.
We don't have, so we don't have any choice in
Right.
electricity.
My point is that I think it's a good point, and I think it's an important one. I think I personally like favoring more towards fixed, so I think
More towards fixed.
more towards aligning fixed with
Yeah.
fixed and variable with variable. But I do recognize, I think what Mark said is important too on conservation, some flexibility, and some of those things, and all the points that Bob and John are making. So I think we're probably okay with this.
Yeah,
But
I
it's an
agree.
important thing to keep in mind, and I appreciate you bringing it up. It's something that we should keep in mind.
I agree. We want, in water as an area, we want conservation, and wastewater equals water. Electric, since you brought it up, Bob, is another one, but I know it's not on the agenda. We're not so keen on conserving kilowatt hours necessarily. All right, let's move
I
on.
would not say it that way.
I just-
Okay.
And so here are the percentages changes. So again, the average is 13% per year, and you can see that it's much more evenly distributed in year one here, because we didn't change anything structurally. We updated it. And so this little percent change that you see down here in the bottom right, where we went from 58 fixed to 60%, sorry, we went from 60% fixed to 58% fixed, will result in small changes to how it impacts customers. And so that's why it's not all 13% across the board here. But it's a lot closer than water, where you saw some pretty significant changes to the rate design. And again, all these percentages will be exactly 13% for years 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Pesky question, but why did you use 15 CCF for the high use? We used 8 for water, but 15 as it flushes out.
That's a good question. Let's see. So for water,
Use 8.
I used 8. Yeah, you're right. That's an oversight, I'm sure. 15 seems really high. So I will, next time you see this, it will be 8. Or
Yeah,
I'll double check both numbers.
I don't mean it for it to be a gotcha question, but I mean.
No, it's a good question.
Our average is at roughly, I think it's 2 CCF, but it's not, I think it's not unusual for a house as opposed to a condo. A lot of people, a lot of usage. It's not unusual for people to have 5, 6, 7 CCF in a month, which means that, the bill impact here that we're talking about 3, 4 years out, people will be looking at $500, $600 a month for wastewater. And I think it's like, if they have 6 CCF for water, that'll be $250. So $250 for water, $500 for, this is how we get to well over $1,000 on a total utility bill. And so that's kind of why this caught my eye. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it wasn't gotcha at all. I would have asked the same question.
Okay.
And that concludes wastewater. So
Let me open up to the public. Any questions from the public locally or online? Oh, seeing none. Board, any other questions, conversation?
I got a motion.
Sure.
Motion to approve the wastewater rate study with a 0 allocation of property tax.
Second.
Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Approved. All right, let's talk about the project schedule. Eric, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Mark can just jump in here too, of course, but he will finalize the engineer's report now with based on the board's decisions today. And we will send out Proposition 218 notifications. Those will go out by mail to all customers, and has to be by mail. And then they will have a number of days to respond. And I'm correct. Help me out with that. Is it 60 days, Mark?
45.
45. We counted for 45 days. which will end before the September 5th meeting, and then we will, in a public hearing that will occur before the regularly scheduled board meeting, we will present the tally of any protests, if there are any. Last time we had none, or no, last time we had 8. So we'll present those. And if there's not a majority protest, then the board can adopt the rates or not adopt it at that time and implement it on October 1st. Does that sound right, Mark?
That's right.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
All right. Thank you very
Nice job
much.
on the studies, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll make those corrections and get those reports out to you, and everybody have a great 4th.
So,
Thank you. You too, Mark.
All right, move on to, I'll say the next agenda item, 9A turned into 9B, so page 28 of the packet there. Okay, so for this topic, I'll give a little bit of an update and certainly ask John, who's been working with me on this, to chime in. A couple of things I want to highlight. So in the past month, remember the last board meeting, the board asked John and I to continue the conversations with Alpine County. We've also been talking to Kirkwood Mountain Resort, Ricky Newberry and his team there, just to keep them up to date and getting feedback. And so a couple of important things that have happened in the last month. The first is gratitude to Ricky for introducing John and I to the Lake Valley Fire Protection District team there. And so it was about a week and a half ago or so. John and I met with the director of their board there, John Rice, and then their fire chief, Chad Stephen, and had a great conversation with them, got to know them, and asked them if they had any interest in what that would look like for servicing us here. And that's why you see a new row. And this is why I asked staff to put together this table, because now we actually have 3 proposals now, including the Amador one that we received in December, and then the Alpine County conversations that we've been having. So that's the first item in here. So you can read the conversations, the email conversation that John sent me to John and I. But it was a really good conversation with them. You can see their numbers in here. That's the first thing. The second thing is that on Tuesday, I went down to Markleeville and got to attend the Alpine County Board of Supervisors board meeting. So Supervisor Woodrow's here and got to see their meeting there. And Chief Ansel and I were there on behalf of the district to talk to the Board of Supervisors. As of, just a reminder, as of today, it's supposed to be been staffed with Supervisor Woodrow's, kind of consent and knowledge of this topic to bring it forward. And what we were trying to do is get their board to fully understand this, because this was the first time some of those supervisors have heard of this, given the Brown Act and those sorts of things. And so our goal was just to be able to present, inform, and then have their staff, their board authorize staff to move forward and engage in these conversations with the full backing of the board. I'm happy to report that I thought it was a really good presentation. We got some really good questions from their board of supervisors. And the end result was that the board of supervisors had authorized an ad hoc committee for them to move forward with us to continue these conversations. So Supervisor Woodrow will continue on with us, as well as Supervisor Evan Misak. He will be joining this ad hoc committee, and then we'll be working with Klaus Leinbauer and Paul Washam, the fire chief. So that group of us is now collaborating. We have a call scheduled for a week from today to go over those numbers to try to nail them down. And then we can talk about the timeline and everything from there. But those are the major activities that have happened over the last month since we last met.
So on our side with Alpine, it's you and John and Rick, is that correct? And their team?
And Eric is involved with this as
Eric is
well.
involved.
And then like the people that I just mentioned from the Alpine County and the Board of Supervisors. John, did I miss anything?
I think you covered it pretty well. Did Jerry have any comments?
Yes, Jerry.
Guess I have to stand here, right?
Yeah, well, people can hear you better. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
okay. Yeah, no, I thought it went really well, and we'll be joined by Evan Misak. And our CAO is going to be retiring shortly, and so she's kind of pulling back on things. So I think it's excellent that we've got Evan joining us in the conversation, and then just moving ahead. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, likewise, and thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for all your help.
Thanks for
Working with us, Terry, and personally, you've been really helpful in getting this conversation going. So really, thank you for all of that. I did get a question from a person yesterday asked, did we get at that meeting, did the Board of Supervisors authorize to pay for a fire department in Kirkwood? And I want to be clear, just on the record here, that they do not authorize funding for a fire department. They authorize them to continue the conversations that we can nail down a number that we would pay them to offer the services here. I just want to be very clear on that in case anyone's listening out there. That is what the conversation is. So any questions from the public or from the board in terms of the updates here that we've had?
The only thing I'd add is it's just seems like a very fair situation. It's, when you walk in the building here and you're looking in our fire station, I mean, it's a very high quality facility. We've got high quality apparatus, fire engine, good housing. So, and there's a lot of activity here, both with the ski resort, the residents on Highway 88, that it just seems like it's a benefit to both Alpine County and Kirkwood Valley to be able to put this together. I mean, we're bringing significant resource and Alpine County's bringing significant resource, and so it does seem like a good solution for both sides.
Would that be true for all three on the sheet there?
I think it would be to some degree. I think, we don't have much of El Dorado County in the valley here, or the valley does reside in El Dorado, so it
And
seems
Lake
like
Valley is 100% in El Dorado County.
yeah, so it seems like a better fit for Alpine for that reason, that we're not stepping over
Makes
district
sense.
boundaries as much. You can still probably make it work as a consulting service, but
And they noted that as a thing that would have to get finalized.
what's the part of El Dorado County, part of Kirkwood Inn or something like that?
Yeah,
Yeah, the right.
Part of that.
Yeah,
Girl Scouts camp.
the cross country.
and the Girl Scout.
Any
Yeah,
questions?
question.
Yeah.
What is the difference between the captain and the battalion chief?
I wondered that too.
Ansel, you want to mention?
So the question is the difference between captain and battalion chief.
And what they're able to do, I mean, is the battalion chief able to do more than a captain?
Yes, they're basically the battalion chiefs, the supervisor for captains, engineers, firefighters, and below.
What do we need to get the minimum function to, do we really need a battalion chief to do that?
Typically a captain and then a fire chief would probably be satisfactory, but for Amateur's case, they were offering battalion chiefs and captains for their model. For Eastern Alpine County, it would be firefighters, and the
Captain.
Alpine County chief would be the supervisor, which again would reduce the cost.
Right, so it's actually just, we wouldn't be introducing as much hierarchy, basically.
Yes, that is correct.
But they could do the basic functions.
It's also the three agencies' judgment on what the proper level of resource is,
Okay.
right? Like, we didn't go to Lake Valley and say we want a different proposal. We said, here's the situation, how could you provide services?
What level
And
of
this, and this is what they felt like the proper level of resource we were.
Right.
So there's not really a hard and fast, like, what's the proper resource, right? It's a cost trade-off with benefit implications.
And Chief Washam, I think, has been clear, and he was clear on Tuesday that, if he had his perfect world, he would probably want more coverage than just one person on here per time, but he also has said that he thinks he can make this work at the price that we're giving us, given our knowledge and what our experiences are. So I think all the fire chiefs that we've spoken to would want to have more towards the Amador and the Valley levels of service. But I think Chief Washam, correct me if I'm misunderstanding anything that he said, but my understanding of what he said on Tuesday and is that he can make this work, and he's confident this will provide a level of service. But there's always that more. This is the minimum that he would be willing to service us with.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Maybe you could comment, I know we've talked about this so many times, but the volunteer model still.
It'll still be a big part of it, but that program would be run by Alpine County. Right.
Rick, do you have any sense on the current the volunteer corps? Do you have a sense how they react? Does it make no difference? that's a silly way to ask it, but how would the volunteer corps react to, this model?
I'd like to believe I've been very transparent with our volunteers since we've had initial conversations with the Amador Fire System District. But with the inclusion of volunteers supplementing the paid employee here at Kirkwood, they're very much engaged and I'm actually telling the volunteers now to go out and seek more additional training beyond what I can offer to have them potentially have the opportunity to come work here as a paid employee via Alpine County. This model is approved.
I think it's been very transparent from my perspective, so.
What's that?
So I think Rick has been transparent to the
Yeah.
firefighters that I.
Well, we're still very dependent on volunteers because we don't want one person
Correct.
responding to an incident. We want a full team.
And Bob, that would be the scenario, it'd be 24/7, but one person.
There's always one paid professional.
It's the level of service that you see as one captain, 24/7, 365, or
Yeah.
one captain engineer fire. Those
Right.
those are the level of service, and then I think in any of these cases, it could be supplemented in the second and third, but most certainly in the first.
Right. Another question, we've talked about this also often, but medical, for some people, in the community, medical is as important or more important than fire. Has medical been part of any of the discussions like with East Alpine? It's EMT functions, whatever.
These would be EMT,
These are EMT, like you'd expect a firefighter.
firefighter EMTs.
Correct.
So
That,
yes, okay.
how would we explain, like tomorrow at the HOA meetings, how do we position one of these models with respect to your EMT service would be different with under this than it has been up to now, or it'll be just the same, or?
Well, I mean, I think that the reality is any of these three options is an increased level of service,
Medically as well?
medically and just generally speaking.
Yeah,
There are shifts that go fully uncovered right now, which
Right.
means no one from Kirkwood Valley is responding,
yeah,
and we're getting support from our neighbors.
yeah,
You have people who are gonna be sometimes responding who are not EMTs, like myself.
mhm,
And you're gonna have people who are EMTs and you're gonna get developed care. So this is gonna give you some level of a guaranteed level, your minimum level of service has now gone up.
great, thank you.
Okay, any questions from the community? There's a couple of things I just wanted to go over in terms of kind of next steps and the timeline. I don't see anything else out there. So Eric, could you please go down to page 29 with the timeline here? Sure. Thank you. I just want to highlight a couple of things. So
So no one responded. You asked a question and
sorry, if anyone had any comments?
does any member of the audience want to provide any
Yeah,
comments?
I didn't see any hands go up and else.
There's no hands up.
So, lacking any comments, I would say, the timeline that we're working towards is July. Or I see Ricky, you've put your hand up, so hey, Ricky. Stop there and let him speak.
Asked in the Q&A as well. I'm just curious with that Lake Valley proposal, understanding with that price tag, that's not offering advanced life support, paramedic level of care.
No.
There was, do you want to scroll to the level of service there? On the,
Just kind of building on that questioning for the basic EMT, like my understanding, the Lake Valley option was a paramedic ALS scope, just so we're clear.
yeah, I think we still have an ambulance here.
So I think it's worth noting you get what you pay for.
Yes, I agree with that.
Right, just for transparency.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Ricky. Okay, any other comments, questions? Okay, in terms of the timeline, the way that I guess the first thing is census. To Ricky's point, this is a more expensive option, and we didn't talk about this last time. The first question is there a consensus like there was before that we would continue to focus on the Alpine County proposal as opposed to the two others that we have? I should say the Alpine County option with 2 captains. Is that still a consensus of the board?
Yes, for me.
Yes.
Okay, so in that spirit, my intention would be that next Friday, when we have this meeting with our Alpine County partners, we can really finalize the numbers of that option that we have right now. At which point then in August, we would be able to then know that there is a firm number and can have an Alpine County option, if any, to proceed with. And then we can talk about the updating of the 218 report, and we can start thinking about the customer survey. And so if you scroll down a little bit further, Eric, into this part of the packet, there is a draft that the communications committee came up with. I welcome feedback on this, now, preferably, since we're in the meeting. But this is the kind of format of a letter that would be sent out to our customers. And if you think about what could happen here in the August board meeting, we would have potentially some finalized numbers. Those finalized numbers would get reflected into the engineer's report. Our customers would then have their proportionality of the benefit received put into this individualized email. And then this survey that they get, that they link to the survey, they could give us indication, yes or no, as to whether or not they would be willing to pay, for some level of service as indicated at the top there at their values. And then in September is when, as a board on September 5th, I guess would be, we would then talk about whether we would go forward with the full 218 process, given the feedback and the conversations that we've had.
Well, there's finalizing the cost, and there's also finalizing amount of property tax you could apply for them.
That's
To be able to do this survey.
That's true. That's exactly right. Thank you for that clarification, John. Thank you. And the rate study that we just did impacts that conversation for sure. Because again, think about what's going to have to happen is we have to have, and I said this at the supervisory meeting, so you kind of like X plus Y plus Z. X is the cost of the service from a county or a provider. Y is our own operational costs, which I believe was like $280,000. And then you subtract out Z, which is how much do we want to allocate from property taxes to then pull that number back down. That X plus Y minus Z is the number that we would put into the 218 engineers report. And then that would be the full number that you take the proportionality of the benefit received to, and that shows up in here. So thank you, John, for that clarification, that those are the two things that we have to decide on.
I'm sorry to forget, but is it necessary to survey? I mean, it calls out, this is not the vote. Why do we have to do the survey?
No, we don't have to do this. If you go back to when we first talked about this, the intent was to say that, there is a cost. I mean, I don't remember, it's tens of thousands of dollars.
No, it's not the cost, but the reader, the resident might say, well, why are you surveying? Just send me the ballot, let me vote.
Because sending the ballot to vote had a cost to it. And so
Okay.
the question was, do we want to spend $20,000 of your money if we know how this vote works and we know the proportionalities and benefit received? If we know that there's very low likelihood, almost certainty that this would not pass, then we would save the district
right
a couple of tens of $1,000s. And
Will we discuss this in comms?
this one?
Yeah.
I sent this around in comms.
And so that it comes.
It's actually fairly common. It's fairly common to do kind of a mock ballot like
Yeah,
this.
no, it totally makes sense. I'll that's it.
Just a clarification, who is getting this? Letter? Email?
Even property owners,
One per property owner?
it will be mailed to the property owner of record on the county assessor list.
Okay. So this will be done by print or email?
218 ballots have to be by.
No, I know, but
Oh.
this survey.
This staff has figured that out. Yes, we've been working with you and.
So it would be the primary receiver of the bill for each.
Not the secondary accountants or anyone with audits.
Okay, so-
The accountants don't get it on obviously.
Okay,
So no tenants, no accountants.
all right. Now, will that be the same? That won't necessarily be the same Oh, okay, and then we can apply the.
The only
value
people that are considered customers and not secondaries are actual owners, so
Yeah.
it will be decided.
Okay, and then we can apply the weighting factor ourselves,
Yes.
right? Because what matters is not how many yes votes we get only, but the value of that yes vote is proportional to
Exactly.
the.
And how many ballots come back?
Right,
I mean, not for the survey.
Right.
The survey is more
Yeah.
directional. I mean, I think we can still do that computation of how many people responded to this, of course,
Right.
right,
but it's the two dimensions.
Yeah.
Weighted value of yeses and number of votes that come, or weighted value votes that come back, because that's the 50% that you're dividing.
okay.
All right, if there's nothing else, I just want to say thank you again to the Board of Supervisors for having Chief Ansel and I there on Tuesday. It was great. We spent a good bit of time talking to the Board of Supervisors. Again, Terry, thank you personally for the work that you helped us with to move this along, and all the Alpine County staff. And John, for all the work you've been working with me on this, and then, you know, our Lake Valley friends who we met last week. So thank you everyone for all the work on this. All right, let's move on to 9C, finances, page 53.
I just want to say thank you to Doug and John, who's did a lot of work that's unpaid. So appreciate you taking the lead.
Well, it feels like we're making some progress. Just chance to be optimistic for a change.
Well, we know what the community
I agree.
doesn't support,
We know what.
and we know what level of service we don't provide currently. So this is a huge step.
It's a good way to frame it. You know what that one, support.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we softened up the whole crowd for you again. What it is, you got a really lucky run here. Put a lot of meat in the meeting for finance.
Just make it 9 days now.
All right, this is the overview and budget variances for April. We are on track for April. Any questions on the overview and variances? Okay,
Did you put the note in about the, I'm looking at my notes
Mhm.
to you before the finance meeting, page 5, balancing consolidated why the current assets are
yes,
one
after
seventy.
that,
Did you get that note?
for the balance sheet,
Yes.
yes.
My-
So moving down to
Yeah,
balance.
so the timing of the sort of treatment of farmers payments and portion of property taxes, that was the answer, I think.
Yeah, so in case you looked at the balance sheets of why is there this variance, that's the explanation.
So the balance sheet, our operating and capital reserve are better than budget, so. Okay. Any questions on balance sheet? Okay. Moving down to combined income statement. Our interest income year to date is looking good at $112,097. Any questions on the combined income statement or the individual income statements also?
Well, they're in the right direction.
Mhm.
That's, thank you, that's good.
Moving down to preliminaries for May. Any questions on May preliminaries?
John noted we're doing better than budget, so we don't have a lot of questions to ask. Why are we doing worse?
Why aren't we do better?
Why don't we do better?
Budget?
Better, yeah.
Eric, I'm
Go
never,
ahead and buck
never
that
gonna
trend.
say we should, use budget as our only barometer.
The only things we, that you'd see through, you can see how the COVID years kind of average out for the budget. With, the commercial was down, residential was up during COVID years, so now that those are built into the multi-year average, you'll see it causes some variance that I kind of scratched my head at first, but then that kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah, all of the usage rates across all the funds.
Yeah, it's every utility, yeah.
All right, cash flow. Not much change, but yeah, still looking good.
All right,
Any
Any
questions?
other questions for Terry? Any questions from the public for Terry? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions.
Thank you.
On to 9D. Thank you, Terry. Page 71, this is policy 380 investments. Eric,
So annually, we are required to, Finance Committee reviews the investment policy and where we have our investments and either affirms out or recommends changes. Both staff and the Finance Committee recommend keeping the funds predominantly with 5-star.
correct. Questions from the public? Let's see, questions from the board?
Sounds like a good direction.
I mean, the choice, we can either make more money or less money, is that what we're voting?
That's basically the
It's
choice.
voting on.
I think we should make more money.
It's a very politically sound decision.
We had a discussion about some crypto that we could even make more money.
Well, that's- Gold is up.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Motion to.
No, that's just an annual policy review, no motions needed,
Okay, great.
unless there was a motion to change what we were
Sure,
doing.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to 9E, page 72.
These ones will require
Connection
motions.
fees.
So this is our annual update to our fees. So if anything is in yellow, you'll know why. Obviously, we just did the water and wastewater rate study, which will be going out, won't be adopted till October 1st. So we will issue this with the current rates from July 1st through October or through September 30th. And then we will update this pending what happens with the water wastewater rate study adoption. So this will go out twice. So we will actually put this on the website with the new fees and the old fees in the case of water and wastewater, simply because.
But the presentation he gave didn't have connection fees in there, did it?
No,
Okay.
it did not. But as part of his contract, he's going to do a connection fee study for us.
Oh, okay.
So that will,
We haven't seen it yet.
you have not seen it yet, right? I was more talking about the rates, which is really the next one, not this one, but okay, so
Yeah.
yes, you're right, yeah, so.
Okay.
Really no change, electric, except for we didn't previously have the bidirectional solar meters as a listed item, and so we've just added that. Any questions on these fees? Okay. And then on the miscellaneous fees and charges, you'll notice we eliminated the custom meter read reports because customers can now go on and read their own meters and do their own analyses, as Doug likes to do, to help them sleep his insomnia. But I know he actually does it for reals. So, but anyway, so we've eliminated this. There's no reason for us to provide this service anymore. And if someone did need to do this and wasn't signed up, it would encourage them to sign up.
And the only place we can't cover is the manual reads.
Correct. And then our actual costs incurred on plan reviews has basically doubled since as we've had more studies coming in. So we are upgrading or updating these review and inspection costs to reflect our actual costs incurred over the last couple of years. It's much easier to get the full average amount upfront than have to go back to a customer multiple times and say, we need more deposit, we need more deposit. They tend to get cranky when we do that.
We're having a significant increase in requested or applications,
Yes.
residential.
Yeah, we were down to one a year for probably the first 5 years I was here, and then we're hitting about 1%, which is 7.
Yeah,
So 7 to 10. I mean, that's
That
about
was
what we've
the
been hitting
number
over the last couple of years.
that was the number that we used.
And the rates, it was 1%. It's just a guess. So it's been averaging. I mean, some years are higher. Sometimes it's just a remodel. Sometimes it's a full new house, so on and so forth. You see the new Thunder Mountain over at Sentinels West with its concrete and rebar sticking up in the air. It wanted Thunder Mountain was lonely, so it built a
As long
little
as they
brother.
don't bury a propane tank.
And those are the only changes on that.
Yeah, but that's just for deposits for these ones.
These are just deposits. These are not fees.
Exactly.
Correct.
So it's not.
Yeah.
The number of people that we have per year does not matter. This is the deposit of cost.
Yeah, and still actual costs incurred. So if they go over, we bill them again. They go under, we give them a refund.
Just to be clear that the number of per year is not this.
No, but this does cover staff costs, so it offsets sunk labor for the district.
Just a quick question going back to the meter, custom meter reads. So for does that manual reads that get requested, what does that
These are meter read reports, not manual reads.
Sorry, misunderstood, thank you.
And it's basically it's someone saying, I want to know my usage for the last 5 years. Well, you can now ask. And so even though you could get your manual meter read hourly, you can go see what your monthly bill is if you log into your account.
Yeah.
So you can build that yourself.
Okay. All right. And that's it. Okay, so I will accept a motion to adopt these. There's no discussion, no questions.
Yeah, motion to adopt the schedule of fees and charges.
So second.
Second.
All in favor indicate by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Yeah. Eric.
Per district policy, if there is any uncollectible debt or bad debt over $100, we are required to get board approval. Finance committee has reviewed this. This is a person who is no longer a customer, nor were they a property owner. Therefore, we were not able to lien the property or obtain it through escrow, which is generally how we do it. And so we are asking permission for the board to write off this bad debt.
Yeah, that also means there's no service to shut off or anything like that. They're no longer a customer.
Correct.
So this is just retiring them.
So
$1,500.
what effect does it have on the customer who now owns the property?
This is a renter, not an owner. The ownership did not change.
Oh, okay.
And the auditors like if we have to go through this process to write it off. That was one of the suggestions a few years ago to enact this policy. So we were following it, and we request the board, someone that the board.
Give you a motion.
Yeah.
Motion to approve retiring bad debt.
Second.
Second. Abstain seconds.
Discussion, all in favor indicate with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed, okay, passes. Thank you. All right, let's go over to 9G. Resolution 25-0.
I'll be taking this one, Rick. So as the board is aware, staff's been working towards purchasing another unit for employee housing. And the personnel, the last several board meetings or a couple board meetings, we've contacted a couple different lenders, and we decided to go with Five Star Bank, who's currently our bank, as you know, and they've loaned us money for the last 2 real estate property purchases for the district. Their help, along with Sarah Zoom, who's with Sierra Gold Realty, has allowed us to basically put the property into escrow now. And so what I'm looking today is board approval for the resolution 2503, which would allow myself, Assistant General Manager Rick Ansel, along with Director Peter Dornbrook, Secretary of the Board, to continue the transaction and actually move forward with the loan and with Five Star Bank.
Yeah, the notes in there are just to show the anomalies of gaining a mortgage as a business entity rather than as a consumer. So y'all are all used to kind of a good smorgasbord of mortgage programs for individuals or consumers. You don't get those as a business. So I think this is a 10 year fixed, 25 years.
Amortized over.
Yeah, it's 25 years amortization, so it controls the size of the monthly payment. As if you're paying it over 25 years, but it's fixed for 10 years. So that means the district will have to either pay that off or refinance it again inside of 10 years. Because a normal 30-year fix would not be something that is available to an entity like the district. Like it would be to any of us as a concern. And I'd already been through this with a nonprofit, so it was a replay for me. The first time I heard that, I was like, what? Now, on the other hand, the interest rates probably would have half a point lower.
Yeah,
Yes.
a bit more than that.
Yeah, you put it as the Five Star close financing, it was like 5.16.
Yeah, 5.16, and most of the consumer loans right now for a similar term are about 5.7. So it's a good rate.
Any questions? I don't see any hands up, I don't see anyone here. That's it. Move resolution 25-03.
I motion to approve resolution 25-03.
Is there a second?
Yeah, also.
Okay, all in favor, indicate with aye.
I,
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Passes. All right. Item H. Randy. Why don't you bring? Thank you, Rick. Good work on that.
Yep.
All right, good afternoon. Just noting, we are approaching the end of our fiscal year of performance reporting. I will provide at the next meeting a comparison over the last few years. That's been requested before. So if we take a look at electric, we did have a production of about 450,000 kilowatt hours. That production was all purchases off the grid. We show a 16% unidentified system loss, bringing us to 10% for the year. Something else we're looking at in electric is trying to align these loss categories with the electric master plan so that it's closer to see, these are what our engineer expects us to see, and these are what we're actually seeing. So I'm going to be looking at next year's performance reporting for just the electric category.
Brandy, you've been super helpful in some offline Q&A on electric unidentified losses. One question I have and I never quite understood, 16% is the unidentified loss. Is this seasonal? In other words, our volume is down, of course, to 400 something because it's off season. Does that correlate with the fact that our percentage loss rate is up?
It should.
It doesn't surprise you that we went from single digit to 16?
Right. It should, because in this unidentified system loss category, you have things like the line loss and the transformer loss that you're going to see no matter how many kilowatt hours we sell. So it should be higher in the summer months when we're selling less. It doesn't always track that way, but it doesn't surprise me. If we go down to propane and look at that, in May, we had an 18% unmetered, which counteracts the March and April negative numbers. We're at 0% year to date. We're happy to see that. On water, if we go down on the page, the only thing I want to note on water is in April, we talked about this high 43% unidentified loss. And we talked about that being perhaps the tanks refilling. Yes, exactly. The tanks refilling from the water leak we had and the tank was draining down. And you do see that recovery in May. So we didn't lose. We sold more water than we pumped in May, which makes sense because that water was stored in tanks. So 17% year to date for water is an unidentified system loss. And then the last note is on wastewater, May at an 83% unmetered, which is I&I, extra water getting into the system. Not unusual for snow melt season, 32% year to date there. And with that, I'll take any questions that anybody might have on performance reporting.
So 83%, we normally hit that. I don't recall the previous years. Yeah.
We often hit numbers at least one or 2 months a year though.
Wow.
But presumably the volume is also lower too, right? So in proportion to a percentage, it's.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a lot. I mean, you're looking at numbers like that, and if you walk into the wastewater plant, you've got clear water coming into the wastewater plant. It's obviously an I&I issue, so it can be quite large.
Would it be possible to add to this report the percentage goal like we have for electric, where you put the goal or the target I&I?
We have discussed that previously.
Yeah, if we could do that, it's not a tangible thing that we can put our hands on.
Okay.
Yeah,
Annually or monthly? This month? Annually, it's more doable, right?
Yeah, just, we have 15% for water and, can't remember. Annual is what I mean, but
Until we've actually repaired our system and done the wastewater master plan, it would be pure guesswork. The goal would be ether. It would be a unicorn. It doesn't exist. It's just not a thing that you can put your finger on.
thank you.
How much snow did we get? How much snow did we get? Did we get rain on snow? All those things change it, so it's not an attainable target. There's no point in setting a target because it's made out of titanium.
By the way, my point on that meter number is that our meter number is half as much in May as it was in early a third, right? So I'm just saying it's metered, it's lower, but we have all the snow melt coming in, so the actual numbers are going down. But we're getting more water, and you said we get clear water coming in, so the percentage is going to be much higher. Just based off of that ratio changing. Things that we know are working, getting metered is going down, but we're getting more water coming in from the INI, so that gap is always going to get larger over the course of the spring.
Sounds like algebra.
But my point is that 80% of this number is, it's a big number, but it's like we're also lowering our known good metered values, so the gap is going to get larger and larger. That's my point.
Well, just on that math question. So in May, water production was 628,000, but actual metered into the wastewater was 358.
I'm very.
Usually those are similar numbers.
That's the water leak.
Okay,
The main break.
that was in May.
The refilling of the tanks has been.
Oh, okay. So that's what it was.
Okay, well, math aside, thank you. Any other questions on that? Or any of the other charts? Unless we go over wells or anything like that, anything else want to cover? Anyone else have questions on it? Okay.
The graphs aren't as popular as they used to be. They used to be really
I wonder
popular.
what changed. What changed that?
All right,
Graphs
moving
are
on,
the same.
moving on to agenda item 9I, on page 93. So, Brandy, I think you're gonna talk about this one as well. Manganese.
Happy to. So as I think everyone is aware, we were issued, the state issued the PUD a notice of violation for the secondary MCL of manganese. And so there's some information here in the staff report about what that means and how we are able to respond to it. In summary, it's a secondary MCL, which means it's an aesthetic issue. It's a taste or an odor complaint. But it is something that the state can make us respond to. We have a few options here, which are listed in the staff report, 1 through 4. Starting with, we could drill a new well that doesn't exceed this MCL. The estimated cost for this are $2 million, more than $2 million. And I will note that extensive work went into finding and siting well 4 and 5. And these wells always had a manganese slightly higher than the MCL. So the possibility of us finding another location within our territory where we could drill a new well that doesn't exceed this is not great. We could, as the water master plan laid out, do a green sand filter. So the estimated cost for this is about $1.5 million. Plus we have to upgrade our water operator certification levels. We could, and that would take the manganese out of the water. The next thing we could do is sequestration, which doesn't take the manganese out of the water, but it adds additional chemicals into the water so that the manganese stays in suspension and doesn't precipitate out and stain clothing or fixtures, which I'll note isn't something that we've gotten complaints about. But
So
potentially you
the
could.
taste would still be there that no one's detected yet.
Yes.
It's not a taste and odor issue. It's an aesthetic issue, which we always call taste and odor because that's what usually people complain about. It is a staining of fixtures.
Oh,
It can.
So
That's-
Is it kind
Well,
of
it's turned dark.
Yeah.
kind of black?
It's kind of a black.
Yeah, we've got some then.
oh, I was just green.
Great, more green.
Yeah.
So iron is red, manganese is black.
So sequestration is the alternative?
It's one of
It
the,
is one of the alternatives,
one of the
yes.
three alternatives we have to list in the survey. Removal, sequestration, or willing to live with it.
And there,
Just to finish my, but we decided in our master plan to go for removal, not sequestration.
Correct.
Okay,
that was the engineer's recommended way to do it.
because he doesn't have to pay for it or?
Because sequestration, it doesn't remove it from the water. The problem's still there.
Right, it's just chemically less accessible.
Noticeable.
But we'd still be in violation from the water board's point of view.
It may be an acceptable option to the water board. It's one that we have to present to our customers.
Okay.
But it would still exist, and so, our permit would have some sort of note that we are exceeding the secondary MCL, but this other process is being put into place.
Okay.
It seems to me that this sequestration question, which I'm sorry, I was slow to understand, and when we did the master plan, is something I don't know if, maybe not here, but we better look into this, because if you're telling customers that we want to do a waiver, if we don't get it, then, our water rates go up 14%, but there is this thing called sequestration, which is relatively affordable, and yet we don't know if that makes us.
So just to be clear, sequestration is a temporary measure we can do to come into compliance, and eventually, if we will have to do removal. Sequestration is a way to temporarily get us out of the NOV, but we have to build removal eventually per the notice of violation.
Couple of years, maybe.
I don't remember the timing. We have to present a plan to him, and I think it was within 3 years we had to build removal. So we could do sequestration right now, and in 3 years we'd have to build a green sand filter, which is a giant, big pressure vessel that would sit outside and would look really lovely in the meadow.
But that's exactly the thing that we have.
We'll put that in the cover letter. That was, yeah.
And that's the thing we budgeted to do, right? The green sand.
Correct.
But certainly in our communication to customers, we need to explain this option.
Yes.
And then the last thing that we could do is apply for a waiver. The estimated cost of this is $30,000, and this is a sunk cost.
Does sunk cost mean we already spent it?
Correct.
Right, so I would take it out since it is, I wouldn't mention it to customers since it's already done.
Staff recommends that we pursue the waiver. It would be a 9-year waiver if successful. There are some fairly high hurdles here and some time constraints. So we've started conversations with the Department of Drinking Water. We've submitted a draft copy of the customer survey.
The survey and the letter, or just the survey?
Both. We will do the survey. We did finally get it back late yesterday from the state. The survey, we have no choice in the language. We can do nothing about it. We gave them our draft survey, which was a page, and we got 3 pages back. We must send their survey. Now, can we send a cover letter explaining the next 3 pages?
Don't read these 3 pages.
In English? No, because if you read, anyway.
Yeah, you're right.
Our cover letter is going to explain in 6th grade reading level, like newspapers are gauged at, what the next 3 pages mean.
Okay, how many questions are on there?
3.
Survey. Oh, it's still 3.
It's still 3. No, that's set by public utility code. That's not, even they can't vary that. That is legally, you must ask these 3 questions.
Okay.
And you want to hear how oddly they're phrased?
Okay, so 3 questions are you willing to pay for manganese reduction treatment? Do you prefer to avoid the cost of treatment and live with the current water quality situation? And 3, are you willing to pay for manganese sequestering treatment? And they sent these back reordered because I had ordered them differently because it's odd to me.
Yeah.
But this is the order that they must be in. This is the words that they have to say.
Okay. So on the cover sheet, we will basically say, on question number 1, this is the most expensive option at $1.6 million. Question number 2 means you agree that we should apply for a waiver. And question number 3, you're going to pay temporary costs for put adding chemicals to your water, and then we're still gonna have to build this in 3 years or so.
Oh, okay.
And that's what the cover letter really needs to do, like
Right.
really well. So, because reading these they are not intuitive.
And so, sorry,
Yeah, right.
isn't there, since this isn't a multiple choice, single question, multiple choice, and there are three independent
It's
questions.
3
what-
questions.
No, I understand, I'm not thinking, I'm learning this now for, isn't there a chance then that we could have multiple yeses, like we could get
You could get
yeses?
3
for
yeses,
every
it would be
thing
an
on the-
overlap.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
And what does that mean though in terms of the vote?
all it means is that the first and third one become irrelevant. Because the way the code is written, they actually put on their second page. Somewhere, I know it's in here.
I guess what you're
Oh,
saying
the
is-
result of a customer survey, this is statutory again, indicating willingness to either pay for treatment or, keyword being, or live with the current water quality situation in which at least 50% of billed customers respond that they are willing to live with the current water situation. So if somebody says, yeah, I'm willing to pay for treatment, and yeah, I'm willing to live with it, and they said it both, the or is the operative word there. It's not, yeah, so it's not and.
Okay.
Yes.
So we,
This cover letter has some work to do.
it does, we really need to be able to explain to people and have a pretty open communication when if somebody gets this and they wanna call us, and it's something to be able to answer the question.
This will be on ComCom Thursday. So,
Because 50% of our customers have to come back and,
Yes.
and answer
affirmatively.
with a, I would prefer to avoid the cost of treatment. Or if we don't get that, then we are required to proceed with,
Treatment.
So 1 in 3 are assumed yeses if it's no response then?
No, they're all assumed no's.
Or, sorry.
Sorry.
I-
2 is assumed
I'm a
as
little
a
confused, but.
2 is assumed as a no if if someone doesn't return
Right.
a ballot.
Right,
so if someone ignores a ballot, we have to assume that they want to pay for treatment.
right, that's, yeah, I've said it in the words of the survey, which I just should have said it that way, is no response actually is a vote in this.
It's a vote
And-
for rating.
Okay, and all customers are treated equally regardless of their usage.
Yes. Build
Yes,
customers.
build customers. That's the key operative word.
So none of the other wells met failed this
They're
criteria.
good.
But none of the other wells can produce what 4 and 5 do.
Could you remind us, 4 and 5 produce roughly what percent of our water?
35,
Yeah.
The 2 of them are 35% of our water.
yes.
Oh.
And we, in discussion with the state, they asked, well, are you blending the water together so that your overall source is less? And we are. But because we don't have a dedicated fill line for the tanks, we cannot guarantee that there's not a customer getting water directly from well 4 or 5. That all the water goes together to the tanks,
Say that again, we do blend, but we don't have a dedicated, say it
It's
again.
okay, so,
You blend in, but you don't.
no,
blend out.
yeah, so many years ago,
You blend in to the tank.
to the tanks.
but somebody can take water before it gets to the tank. Cause we abandoned our true transmission line when wells 4 and 5 were drilled over a decade ago.
So we don't have an angle that says we have other sources that are lower than the requirements, so the overall is less. We don't have that ability to say.
And these are the 2 deepest wells too. Which might have something to do with it.
It's the 12th most common mineral in the earth's crust.
Yeah.
We're gonna have manganese.
And as the state added to our survey, people often take it as a nutritional supplement.
That's true. Save money.
So anyway, so we're required to obtain approval of the survey. We're required to distribute this to our customers and get it back. And then once we have done those things, we're required to present the results and the engineering report at a public hearing. Before, we'll have all of the pieces of our waiver package that we can submit to the state, which must happen by September 25th. So we're on a very short timeline to get all of this together.
And it sounds from what you said earlier, we've done enough looking into this to know there's no expertise out there. There's no learned best practices from another utility that has figured this out with waivers on manganese. There's no one to learn from.
When we talk to our regulators. They had not done any of these before. It was gonna be a learning curve for them also.
Is this partly because I understand this is a newer standard? Like, wasn't that one of the things you mentioned there? Is that this is like the secondary level?
The secondary level changed, so now as people are getting hits, it's not, there's always been an iron and manganese standard, they generally go hand in glove. But the levels of it have changed, but the amount of our levels of manganese in our wells has been constant.
No, no,
But it's
that's
standard, secondary
standard
that they're issuing, yeah.
Right, so I'm just saying, like, maybe they haven't seen this because they've issued a new standard that is now going to induce other people to go into violation potentially? Is that-
No. Maybe this is a better way to say it. Iron and manganese issues are extraordinarily common in the foothills, especially any of the Sierra communities. Extraordinarily common. However, they generally violate the primary MCL, not the secondary. So they're at a level where they have to do treatment. We're a secondary, we're just a kind of a baby. We're like a wee baby of manganese, whereas these other ones, the Buckhorn Water Treatment Plant in Buckhorn, just down here, the road Pioneer that I did all the work on, had iron and manganese removal as a requirement because it was over the primary MCL. And that was no choice. You have to do this. We're a secondary, we're nowhere close to the primary, which is about 5 times this. So we'd have to quintuple our manganese, and it's been static since these wells were drilled. So I think that's extraordinarily unlikely.
So just the numbers. By my calculations, we have 688 meters, but we have 620 unique billing people,
Correct.
and 542 of those have email. 78 we have to reach by paper.
Yes. And just
What is the implication?
Well, we better make sure that about 300 and about 310
people
people.
respond. And
No,
just,
no
well, that's
response is a no.
right. So just to that point, we will be leveraging staff to make calls to people who don't return these.
Man,
Yeah,
It's that important. I mean, we're talking $1.6 million
Right.
versus zero.
Right.
That
Yeah.
important.
Right.
So staff will be making phone
when
calls.
do you think you'll have the text ready to?
I'm hoping we come to a,
We have a draft.
yeah,
we
we've done a
come
first
to,
draft.
yeah, we just have to add in a bunch of stuff now that we have the thing from the state, which is what we were waiting on. We're
Yeah.
meeting Thursday. My goal would be to start getting these out on Monday, the following Monday. So a week from Monday.
I'm sure it's a silly question, but you'll be talking about this to the HOA, is that, or, I don't know, is it you or someone's meeting with HOA?
Yes, it is one of the topics.
Rick and I are going to.
Newsletter,
Oral
oh,
training
cool.
meetings tomorrow, then.
Yeah, we can hit this in the July newsletter as well,
Newsletter.
because that's gonna go out after.
If I'm not mistaken, at least this is what I wrote in the draft, this is the single CapEx item in the next 5 years.
Correct.
So, and it could be zero, and it provides no enhancement to the quality of life.
Unlike the KVFD conversation where I was.
Exactly.
This is no change in level of
Right.
service. That's the important thing to note. No one's at risk health wise. It was a 10x of it was the health risk, if I remember.
10x was the federal limit, 5x was the primary.
Okay.
For
My point, like, where you say, like, you have serious health problems.
yeah, we're doing
Nothing's
this.
changed.
This isn't this is a big non-issue.
All right, thank you for the work on this, Randy. Thanks for the update. Any other questions before we close this topic? Okay, hearing none. Randy, thank you. All right, Eric, major project, item 10, major project updates, please.
Nothing's changing. You gotta take off a column. Is what-
Since we're talking Excel formatting, could we add just that this is calendar year? I always get tripped up. These are calendar year quarters,
I added that. I apologize. I added it last month and then it fell off this month.
not a big deal.
I'd asked that question before, I think before you joined. I agree.
It was added. It's just it's the print area that got reset.
No worries.
Oh, I'm not worried about it.
Okay. Any other updates on the time?
Nothing really. The only thing I would note, is we're gonna start slouching towards our electric rate study. We'll need to get a consultant on board. Bob and I met, I think about 3 potential. There are almost no private electric rate study people out there because most utilities are big enough to do it in-house. Period, the end. That's how it's done. So there's very few consultants, but Bob and I did meet 2 or 3 at the last municipal municipal rate setting conference.
Yeah, that was
It's SMUD.
sponsored by SMUD.
Yeah, so this year they didn't have one. It was supposed to be at Trinity, I believe, and they canceled it, but they are planning on having one next year again. But one thing, I mean, unless I hear, consensus to the contrary, it's my intent to just go to those people that Bob and I met, because there's not a whole lot of people out there, and I don't intend to do the whole RFP process, but I'd like to work with Bob to just go with the people we kind of.
They have references.
And they have references, but I mean, in order to get it going, I'd like to just talk to those people we talked to again and see if they're still interested or in business or doing this, and just get.
Ross Canyon does not do rate study in COSA.
No,
So for selecting, that requires a board vote to select the.
if we wanted to go through a formal process, we could do that, or I could just pick the consultant.
I'd like to at least see the proposal and.
Okay, then we'll go through a formal process.
Yeah. Sorry.
But that's okay. It's just gonna delay things.
It's just of all the rate studies we do, it's the hairiest one.
Sure.
Yep.
Does row one chain go away then on the notes?
Row one.
Or does that go away in September?
Or the water study?
Yeah, well, that will go away in Q3. Actually, we'll finish that a quarter ahead of schedule. Yeah. Because we'll adopt it in September. So. But yeah, I just delete the notes as the lines come off, but that line does not come off yet, because we're not done with the waterways sort of rate study.
I'm just thinking of residential minimum payment. This is.
Oh, yeah.
It was actually in reference to the electric thing. Yeah.
Note one, wastewater rate study.
No,
That's
that was for water wastewater. I remember that one. There was also minimum payment, and that's also on number 2, which is for electric.
Right.
It's in both.
Oh, okay.
Remember exactly who and when that came up.
Yes, I remember who.
Okay. Yeah. General manager report, I have nothing. We've gone over everything that I've been working.
Operations report 12.
For operations, just a few things. Probably the most important is our Kirkwood Summer Festival, which is tomorrow between 4 and 7. We've got over 200 people signed up, adults and children, and the silent auction is actually set up in the wall bar right now. And I was surprised at how many items that they gathered for the silent auction. So you make sure you take a run by there.
But none are online. I couldn't find it.
I couldn't find it either. So it's all on clipboards. But Give Butter is the site that you go to make the bids and so forth. So they'll explain that at the wall bar either tomorrow morning or tomorrow.
Should I have a drink first?
Absolutely. For fire department, we're up to 77 calls for the year. There were 4 calls in June, 3 on one day, traffic accidents, an alarm call, which is about average for June, and for the year annual calls, it's about average as well. So we're doing pretty good there. We're still, for the on-call shift, we're still having volunteers do the best they can, but shifts are not taken. It was about 22% of the shifts weren't taken for the month. Again, most of those shifts were evenings and on weekends. Luckily, one of my captains is the camp host at Kirkwood Lake this summer, and so we have a captive audience on weekends. So hopefully that'll help. But we're still looking to try to do the best we can to fill spots. Any questions about fire? I'll move on to propane. Nothing going on in propane, is a good thing. Wastewater, we've had some issues with the plant SCADA system, but our supervisor, Barron, has been doing a really good job troubleshooting and getting the sequencing correct. And so the plant's running actually really well. And we're able to see the plant remotely, but there's still some hiccups, and we're working through those. For electric, we had a service fault up on Dangberg for one of our customers. Basically, it was a direct bury line that failed. So we did an emergency contract with Norberg, who's also doing the work on Loop Road, as you see out the window here, to repair the Loop Road power line. Norberg came in and was able to help us replace the line in conduit and work got done within a week, which was pretty good for Kirkwood standards. And they also came back and cold patched the road with asphalt. So if you didn't know that this happens, you probably wouldn't notice the patch. But we will circle back in the winter when we do all our asphalt and paving to make sure that that patch is solid for the roadway.
And just to be clear, it was not emergency work, it was a change order on an existing contract with Norberg.
Thank you. Technically, that's correct.
Otherwise, I'd have a special board meeting that never happened.
That's exactly right. Thank you for clarifying.
That's why we didn't attend.
That's
Yeah.
It's right. Yeah.
It felt like an emergency situation.
Norberg's the company that we did go through contract and board approval to do the wastewater line repair last year, a replacement down off of the RO Wintergreen. So they've been a very good, clean contractor to work with. And the work that they're doing here on Loop Road, they have a bypass, volcano utilities, a 45-foot parallel section of a water line that we own, of course. The direct area line, as well as 2 culverts, and they just got into our leach field lines crossings now. And so by hopefully next week, they can get up to the vault that we're going to try to make a connection to. So again, very pleased with the contractor and the way they're doing their work. What am I missing, Brady? I think I got all the utilities. That's it. Concludes my operations report.
Thanks, Rick. That's very good. Any questions from the community? No questions.
Have we scheduled a chemical clean for the membranes?
I'm not sure where the cleaning is on the schedule. Randy, can you advise? I know we received chemical today, actually. Took them 4 hours to offload the chemicals, but we'll probably prepare to do that soon on that. For our biannually clean.
Because, I mean, we have a fairly new staff. I mean, some of them probably haven't participated in chemical clean prior to this, right?
Oh, no, we've
No.
had.
But Baron has decades of experience.
He feels strong.
Yes. Yep. They have membranes at the City of Jackson where he worked and at Tuolumne where he worked.
Okay, it's pretty
Yeah, he knows
important.
that, yep.
It's such a valuable asset.
Yep, no, he knows.
Extends the life of the
Yeah.
membranes, which is,
Baron has been intimately involved with the rehab of the wastewater treatment plant, including finding a basin that we didn't previously know about. It was there, but two basins. But the former water superintendent had no idea was there, so Baron was able to discover that, and so yeah.
Isn't it
he's
part of the
getting
Hyde
into it.
Basin or?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's astonishing business, not even known about.
So we're confident you can get it done.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Rick.
Yep.
All right, standing committee reports, go down list as they're listed on our website as always, finance.
It's still much of the board package, the rate studies, the financial reports, the investment policy, retired debt, so on, so nothing else to report.
Okay, thank you. We have
nothing yet.
communications, we had 3 main agenda items. They're highlighted in the board packet. I will note, I know we talked about the propane rate changes, so that's drafted. I wrote that up, and Eric will be sending that out, I think, pretty soon. And then Chris wrote up the draft for the manganese, so we'll finalize that next week. And then the survey that I put in the packet for the, that's those main items. And if you have feedback, you should certainly let us know. Patience, but that's what we'll be focusing on next meeting, as well as manganese and fire. Personnel, I would say only thing I'll add for personnel is that we talked at our last meeting about family housing and the policies associated with family housing that we'll be updating, or not updating, but I guess creating. And so a lot of good conversation around how things will work logistically. I think some of it goes back to legal questions that we've asked staff to get back to legal for, and we'll continue this conversation, I'm sure, at our next meeting. IT and cybersecurity.
We met last week. The main focus has been on making sure that all employees and board members know how to look for suspicious activity and not respond to it. Let me say the employees are doing exceptionally well. And the board has some room for improvement. So you probably saw a couple of days ago, we sent out a new training to go through that's due in 30 days. 28 days now. It doesn't, I took it this morning. It doesn't take more than
Oh,
about.
I deleted that. I thought it was fishing.
Yeah. That's a good point.
That is legitimate?
Yes.
Yeah, that was legitimate.
Okay.
The other thing we're looking at is strengthening our two-factor authentication, moving to an authentication app and away from cell phone
Yes.
verification. So those are the two main
For
changes.
access to what?
Access to operational systems for the district.
But it could impact board members too, in terms of things like Box or something like that as well.
Yes. Or logging into your
Or-
KMPUD out.
Yeah, I'll emails to Bob or John, it could impact.
It will impact, it will.
It should impact.
It will
It
impact.
will impact all of us.
The reason we're switching to that, John, just for your edification, is talking to the cybersecurity expert at the conference I was just at. Basically, hackers got into Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and sat there for 2 years. And that's all they did was sit there, called lay of the land, LOTO. And so what they did was, for high value targets, for example, Kamala Harris, get a verification code text. Well, they could intercept that text and go see what she was trying to log into and have that code. And so multi-factor authentication with an app prevents that problem. So cell phone authentication, if any of you do it, stop, get an app. That's basically was the advice from this guy this was the cybersecurity director of cybersecurity for Department of Energy, as well as I forget who the other guy was. I think he was with Southern or Avista, one of the other two. They're head of cybersecurity. So
And this is pretty standard in my experience professionally. Where industry's going. So
Yeah. So that's our focus. The other thing, we did get our insurance, our cyber insurance renewed. There was one defect we had to fix, but that got fixed. That was meeting.
So it's going the route of this app instead of biometrics.
I think
Yeah.
biometrics is
Well,
another option,
it's-
but the app.
But
That's right
biometrics,
from there.
But the authenticator app would use your biometrics, so you can use Face ID to log into the authenticator app essentially.
is, biometrics is, it's gotta go there.
Yeah, I mean, the point is that this is a rotating key every some amount of time, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, 3 minutes that is
I
on
used to have, so
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
this is something that
Yeah,
follows.
well,
so this is on your phone.
It's now an
instead of-
app.
I had
So,
that like 10,
yeah.
15 years
Right.
ago.
Yeah,
It's
it's the same thing.
hassle.
Yeah, keys are a hassle, but I'm just guessing you have your phone with you right now, right there, so it's probably not so bad.
All right,
I
not
got
good.
my face.
Sorry.
That was it.
So I'll tell you
I
about
take that
I'll tell you
everywhere.
about it's a terrible error.
All right, LAFCO did not meet, so we will talk about that there. All right, so now we'll move on to the general board discussion, item 15. General board discussion.
What do we do, not agenda items? They're great.
That's right, this is just for us to ask questions, clarification.
Yeah, I know the homeowners meetings are this week and we're gonna get a few of those, but the tennis courts have been raised to me. The disappearing tennis courts, the concerns about losing the other tennis courts and losing the playground. So I think people are quite alarmed. There was I don't have the detail on it, but there's concerns that they're trying to be rezoned. So I don't know if anybody has any more detail on that, but.
Yeah, there's a good letter explaining it all. You didn't get it.
I didn't read it.
Fishing.
Yeah, I deleted it.
I'll be happy to forward it to you.
Yeah.
What?
Can I get you?
Yeah.
Maybe recirculate that.
Thank you, I think that's coming through mostly the KCA, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, but thank you for that, bringing that up. It's an important community topic, for sure. Any other general board discussion?
Next meeting is August.
First, I believe.
Just roughly quickly,
Yes.
what are some of the issues you expect on the agenda?
Well, some of the stuff that's
Fire.
lingering on, yeah. Fire for sure. Nothing on the wastewater,
Possibly like the family policy.
possibly the family housing policy.
too early to talk about electric rate study, right? That won't come up till.
Oh, gosh, no, we have to,
November
we have
or
to
something.
write a request for proposal now, so
Yeah.
that we're at least a couple months out from even having that go out to the consultants.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, another general board discussion, we're gonna move on to agenda item 16, so the board will move into a closed session, where we'll be discussing, general manager's annual performance review and merit increase. So we will pause the recording and then come back, and report back to close the meeting, and that closed session is complete.
That's one of the.
Okay, the board has come back from its closed session to discuss the general manager annual performance review and merit increase. And the board has decided to award a 4.3% merit increase to our general manager for the fiscal year 2026. That's the report for the closed session item 16. So item 17 is the adjournment of the meeting. And remind everyone that next meeting is Friday, August 1st, 2025 at 2 p.m. Hope to see you then. Thank you.